Russian forces are escalating their onslaught against Ukrainian positions around the wrecked eastern city of Bakhmut, Ukrainian officials said, bringing new levels of death and devastation in the grinding, months-long battle. The whole land near Soledar is covered with the corpses of the occupiers and scars from the strikes, Zelensky said. The Donetsk region's governor, Pavlo Kirilenko, estimated more than 2 months ago that 90% of Bakhmut's pre-war population of over 70,000 had fled since Moscow focused on seizing the entire Donbass. Russian troops, alongside soldiers from the Wagner Group, a Russian private military contractor, have advanced in recent days in Soledar and are likely in control of most of the settlement, the UK Defence Ministry tweeted Monday. It said that taking Soledar, 10 kilometers north of Bakhmut, is likely Moscow's immediate military objective and part of a strategy to encircle Bakhmut. But it added that Ukrainian forces maintain stable defensive lines in depth and control over supply routes in the area. An exceptional feature of the fighting near Bakhmut is that some of the fighting has been around entrances to disused salt mine tunnels, which run for some 200 kilometers underneath the area, the British intelligence report noted. Taking Bakhmut would disrupt Ukraine's supply lines and open a route for Russian forces to press on toward Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, key Ukrainian strongholds in Donetsk. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock and Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba talk as they walk in war-hit Kharkiv, January 10, 2023, AP/Ukrainian Foreign Ministry Press Office. Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock made a surprise visit to the eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv near the Russian border on Tuesday, promising more weapons and concrete offers to help Ukraine join the EU. In a statement ahead of a meeting with Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, Baerbock expressed Germany's solidarity with Ukrainians living through Russia's invasion and harsh winter conditions. After Germany last week promised to send Marder fighting vehicles to Ukraine as part of increased military support, Baerbock promised more weapons without specifying which ones. Russia has appointed Colonel General Alexander Lapin as Chief of Staff of the country's ground forces, state-owned news agency TASS reported on Tuesday, despite fierce criticism from leading hawks over his performance in Ukraine. On October 8, Russia named Air Force General Sergei Surovikin as the overall commander of its forces in Ukraine, shortly after the reported sacking of the commanders of the eastern and western military districts. In August, the state-owned RIA news agency reported that the commander of the Black Sea Fleet had been fired after a series of humiliations, including the sinking of its flagship Moskva and the loss of 8 warplanes in an attack on a Russian base in Crimea. The European Union and NATO pledged on Tuesday to provide the Ukrainians with all the military means necessary to defend their homeland, and discussions are scheduled next week on the types of weapons that can be provided, the leaders of the two organizations. Last week, President Vladimir Putin sent the frigate to the Atlantic Ocean armed with new-generation hypersonic cruise missiles, a signal to the West that Russia will not back down over the war in Ukraine. The frigate is armed with Tsirkin missiles, which Russia says fly at 9 times the speed of sound and have a range of over 1,000 kilometers. Russia sees the weapons as a way to pierce increasingly sophisticated U.S. missile defenses, which Putin has warned could one day shoot down Russian nuclear missiles. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev last week warned the United States that the hypersonic missiles would soon be close to NATO's shores. One of President Vladimir Putin's closest allies said on Tuesday that Moscow was now fighting the US-led NATO military alliance in Ukraine and that the West was trying to wipe Russia from the political map of the world. Putin casts the war in Ukraine as an existential battle with an aggressive and arrogant West, and has said that Russia will use all available means to protect itself and its people against any aggressor. Russian Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev is seen by diplomats as one of the major hardline influences on Putin, who has promised victory in Ukraine despite a series of battlefield setbacks. The United States has denied Russian claims that it wants to destroy Russia, the world's biggest producer of natural resources, while President Joe Biden has cautioned that a conflict between Russia and NATO could trigger World War III. Asked about Patrushev's remarks, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said NATO and the United States were part of the Ukraine conflict. The United States and its allies have condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine as an imperial land grab, while Ukraine has vowed to fight until the last Russian soldier is ejected from its territory. The small salt mining town of Soledar is on the verge of being occupied by Russian troops after months of heavy fighting. Occupying the practically destroyed town would constitute the Kremlin's largest success since July, potentially endangering Ukraine's positions in neighboring Bakhmut. Russian troops, together with the Kremlin-controlled Wagner Group mercenaries, likely occupied most of Soledar over the past 4 days, the UK Defence Ministry said on January 10. Soledar sits 10 kilometers north of Bakhmut, which remains Russia's main immediate operational objective after a more than 5-month-long battle to capture the city. Russia's ongoing offensive into Soledar will, highly likely, disrupt Ukraine's logistics near Bakhmut in an effort to envelop Bakhmut from the north, the ministry added. Capturing the city could allow Russia to press toward key cities in Donetsk Oblast, including Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, located 40 kilometers west. Serhiy Cherevatiy, a spokesman for Ukraine's Eastern Military Command, said on January 10 that Russian forces had struck Soledar and its surrounding area 86 times using various artillery systems over the past day. Cherevatiy also said that the goal of the Ukrainian military defending Soledar is to exhaust Russians, so that even if they get a tactical win, it becomes a Pyrrhic victory. Nearly emptied of its 10,000 residents, the months-long heavy battle has largely reduced Soledar to rubble. Wagner Group founder Yevgeny Prigozhin, a close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin, said on January 10 that heavy bloody battles are unfolding on the western outskirts of Soledar as Ukrainian forces still honorably defend the town. Ukrainian officials have not acknowledged that fighting was taking place in such a close range nor that the Wagner had made it to the center of Soledar. Kirilo Mykolov, an analyst with Conflict Intelligence Team, an independent Russian investigative group, told the Kyiv Independent that capturing Soledar would leave Russia a long time away from the big prize, which is currently Bakhmut. Mykolov said there are a few crucial roads west of Bakhmut, where Ukrainian forces remain dominant. Therefore, Russia still appears far from encircling Bakhmut after capturing Soledar. Capturing Soledar would help Russia approach Bakhmut from the north, but an encirclement is still a distant goal for Moscow despite confirmed advances in the town, the ISW said in its January 7 report. To cut Ukraine's supply line to Bakhmut, Russia would need to establish control over at least 2 highways west of Soledar, the ISW said. While Bakhmut sits on a strategic supply route connecting Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts, capturing the city would not have a big impact on the rest of the battlefield situation in the region, Zhdanov said. He added that both Bakhmut and Soledar are small settlements, 70,000 and 10,000 people each, and are not an imminent gateway to Kramatorsk. Since November, Ukrainian forces have begun building its second defense line near Chasiv Yar, a town 20 kilometers west of Bakhmut, to contain a potential Russian breakthrough. Von der Leyen made it clear that sanctions will be extended to those who militarily support Russia's war, namely Belarus and Iran. Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko has allowed invading Russian forces to make free use of Belarusian territory prior to the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. From Belarus, Russian invasion forces advanced on northern Ukraine, and Kyiv in particular. Russian forces continues to use Belarusian territory to launch missile and drone attacks against Ukrainian cities and critical infrastructure. Earlier, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian army, Valery Zaluzhnyi, said that the enemy may potentially launch a new offensive from Belarusian territory in the direction of Kyiv, though Ukrainian intelligence stated that no buildup indicating such an assault has yet been reported. Iran also supports Russia with weapons, notably with suicide drones used against Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Russia has received hundreds of Mohajer-6, Shahid-129, and Shahid-191 attack drones from Iran. According to President Volodymyr Zelensky, Russia has so far received 2,400 drones from Tehran. In November, Iran's foreign minister acknowledged for the first time that Tehran had supplied Russia with drones. But he insisted that the transfer came before the beginning of Moscow's full-scale war against Ukraine. The United States has pushed back against these claims, insisting that the drones were supplied in summer 2022. Iran is also believed to have sent military specialists to the occupied Ukrainian territories to assist Russian troops. According to the sources, Pakistani shipping and brokerage firm Project Shipping plans to deliver 159 containers of ammunition for Ukraine, from the port of Karachi to Gdansk, Poland, in the second half of January. BBC Vesuvius ship will ferry crates full of 155mm artillery shells, M4A2 propelling bag charges, M82 primers, and PDM fuses, all vital supplies needed to sustain Ukrainian artillery units. In exchange, Pakistan may receive Ukrainian assistance in the modernization of its Mi-17 helicopters, sources say. Earlier, Commander of the Ground Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, said that artillery shell consumption in the Russia-Ukraine war is comparable with World War II levels. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg urged alliance members to increase arms production to support Ukraine, since NATO has depleted most of its stocks of surplus weapons and ammunition. The Security Service of Ukraine, or SBU, said on January 10 that it had uncovered over 600 Russian agents and spies in the country since the start of the full-scale invasion. Since February 24, over 1,500 investigations into suspected treason and espionage have been opened, and more than 340 of such cases have been sent to court. SBU noted that during a multi-stage special operation in August, the law enforcement detained the sabotage and reconnaissance group of Russian military intelligence that was allegedly planning to kill Ukraine's defense minister Alexei Reznikov and Kirilo Budanov, head of Ukraine's intelligence directorate, as well as unnamed but well-known Ukrainian activist. In early January, SBU announced that 4 Russian agents who collected data on HIMARS, high-mobility rocket artillery systems, and energy facilities in Donetsk Oblast had been convicted by a court. The armed forces of Ukraine are focusing on maximum exhaustion of the Russian troops near Soledar on the Bakhmut front, so that even the minimal successes of the Russians will result in their defeat. The defenders of Soledar are now doing everything they can to exhaust the enemy, to reduce their potential as much as possible, so that even some of their minor tactical successes, obtained by superior forces and heavy losses, lead to a major Pyrrhic victory. In the last 24 hours the Russians have carried out 86 artillery attacks using various systems on Soledar, Donetsk Oblast, and its outskirts. Bakhmut is currently one of the main fronts of the Russian attack. The fiercest battles are taking place in the vicinity of Soledar. The Russian leadership has deployed Wagner Group special forces on the front line, supported by regular Russian army units. In a new intercepted call released by the Chief Intelligence Department of Ukraine's Defense Ministry, a Russian occupier tells his wife that the Russian authorities are keeping quiet about the events in Makiyivka to prevent a rebellion when in fact, over 600 Russian invaders died there. In the conversation, the Russian's wife tells her husband that the Russians have been taking corpses out of Makiyivka in truckloads, and that 610 people were in fact killed. She was apparently told that by the relatives of another Russian occupier who was directly involved in transporting the bodies. The defense forces of Ukraine launched an attack on a Russian military base in occupied Makiyivka in Donetsk Oblast on New Year's Eve, killing 400 and wounding 300 occupiers to varying degrees of severity. The Russian soldiers were stationed in the building of local vocational school number 19. Igor Gherkin, Strelkov, a Russian terrorist and a former so-called Minister of Defense of the Donetsk People's Republic, confirmed the mass killing of Russian servicemen in occupied Makiyivka. The Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that the death toll following the strike on the Russian servicemen's base in Makiyivka had risen to 89. U.S. plans to train Ukrainian servicemen in the use of Patriot missiles provides further proof of Washington's participation in the Ukraine conflict, Russia's ambassador to the United States said on Tuesday. The decision of the U.S. Defense Department to organize a training course at Fort Sill in Oklahoma is yet another confirmation of Washington's de facto participation in the Ukrainian conflict on the side of Kiev's Nazi criminals, Anatoly Antonov said in a statement posted by his embassy. Antonov said the real aim of the U.S. administration was to inflict as much damage as possible on Russia on the battlefield by the hands of the Ukrainians. A U.S. official, speaking earlier on the condition of anonymity, said the training would occur at Fort Sill in the coming weeks. According to CNN sources, there are substantive changes in the type of military assistance the United States and its allies are sending to Ukraine in response to Kiev's requests. The latest aid package contains an increase in offensive weapons provided, such as Bradley infantry fighting vehicles and modern missiles. The report notes that this reflects Washington's belief that Ukraine has a window of opportunity to liberate occupied territories before Russia can regroup and mount another offensive. Officials said that the new weapon systems give the armed forces of Ukraine significantly more offensive capabilities, compared to the first months of the war. On January 6, the United States announced its largest military aid package for Ukraine, worth $3 billion. It includes Bradley IFVs and Sea Sparrow anti-air missiles, which can be paired with Soviet-era Buk launchers. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, has admitted at a meeting of a defense industry working group that Russia's adversaries in armed aggression are ahead of Russia when it comes to the modernization of Soviet-era T-72 tanks. Medvedev also threatened that the Russian authorities will, if necessary, be forced to apply new penalties for any disruption in fulfilling state defense procurement contracts, including criminal penalties. In November, the Ministry of Defense of the Czech Republic and Ukroboronprom, an association of multi-product enterprises in various sectors of Ukraine's defense industry, edition, announced the establishment of a joint defense cluster for the production of military equipment and ammunition, as well as cooperation in the field of repair and development. In autumn, a public initiative in the Czech Republic raised more than €1 million in just 1 month to purchase a modernized T-72 for Ukraine. The tank was named Tomáš in honor of the first president of Czechoslovakia, Tomáš Masaryk. On January 9, Petr Fiala, the Prime Minister of the Czech Republic, personally signed the T-72 tank that would be sent to the Ukrainian military. In his regular evening video address on January 10, President Volodymyr Zelensky reported that he had stripped 4 people, pro-Kremlin lawmakers Andriy Derkach, Taras Kozak, Renat Kuzmin, and Russian President Vladimir Putin's close ally Viktor Medvedchuk. Derkach is charged with high treason and illicit enrichment, and the High Anti-Corruption Court of Ukraine issued an arrest warrant for him in October. According to the authorities, Derkach received funds from a Russian intelligence agency to create private security firms that Russia planned to use for capturing Ukraine. Medvedchuk, whose daughter Daria names Putin as her godfather, was arrested in April 2022 after fleeing house arrest, and later handed over to Russia in exchange for captured defenders of the Azovstal steel works in Mariupol. Before they were banned and closed down by Zelensky's government in early 2021, Medvedchuk ran numerous media outlets infamous for their Russian-sympathizing narratives. Viktor Medvedchuk is Ukraine's most high-profile pro-Kremlin politician and Putin's right-hand man in Ukraine. He was handed over to Russia in exchange for 200 POWs in late September. Kozak and Kuzmin are Medvedchuk's allies.